I'm Ricky.
And I'm Joe, and this is season 5, episode 11 of the Beer and Broadband podcast. This is slated to come out on October 3rd, 2022, and we're going to get right into it. So, I'm just going to kind of explain the drinks that we're doing. They're both things that we've brewed and brewed separately, but they're off of a recipe that Ricky and I kind of have developed together. One of them was the original recipe. It's called Cidr, and the other one is a recipe we call Basic Bitch, but I brewed with some friends. It's based off of that same recipe. Now the difference between the two is that one of them was made in 2018, right after I moved in here. That's the oldest one, and it is roughly 4 or 5 years old, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The other one, so yeah, it'd be 4 years old at this point, right? 2018 is when we moved in. We made it like that winter. Yeah, it'd be roughly 4 years old, like 4.5. The other one was made in 2020, like summer of 2020, something like that. So it's about like 2 years old, a year and a half old, something like that. And it is, the difference in color is amazing. They're both carbonated, but the newer one is a much lighter color, and the older one is much darker.
Yeah.
So why don't you go ahead and talk about it while I try mine? I haven't tried them yet.
Yeah. So it's really interesting what that difference in those 2 years makes. So the youngest one, the one that's still 2 years old, is pretty old for a cider.
Mm-hmm.
Still has like a lot of funkiness to it, not in a bad way, but just like that funk flavor. A little bit sour. You know, you can taste those spices in it. It's retained the carbonation really well.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the one that's close to like 4 years old, it is so smooth. A lot of the flavors have kind of toned down a little bit. It's almost more like a wine in the sense that it's
Mm-hmm.
not carrying a whole bunch of carbonation, but there's still a little bit there. And it's almost smooth like water. Like, it's not watery, but it's just so smooth. Even though it's a higher ABV, it's just got no burn to it. Nothing really acrid sticking out. It's really good.
Yeah, the oldest one is, oh no, the the newer one is higher. It's
Oh, okay.
10.1%
Oh, gotcha.
ABV,
Okay.
and this one I think is 7 or 8%
Okay.
ABV.
Yeah. 7 or 8's about where we normally made that old one. I think we thought when we started that the newer one's only 6.
You are correct.
But
I just happened to look at it as I
That's
was
okay.
like, didn't we put that on the label? You know, and yes, it's on the label.
Yeah, but even then, 7 or 8% that smooth, that's almost one of those like dangerous things.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not sure. Like, I would drink either one if you brought it to me in a glass or like at a bar or something. I'm not sure I would order the basic one again, but I'd get like 2 or 3 of the aged one, and then I would probably be so messed up and not even know it because of that ABV just sneaks up on you.
Yeah, and I mean it looks like a wine too. I think the difference in cider base that we use between the two might also affect, because we use Westinghouse for the oldest one, and I used Mott's for the newer one.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, I think you mean White House for the. Yeah.
Yes, not Westinghouse,
Yeah,
White House.
White House is one of my favorites for ciders just because it's got a different like apple profile.
Right.
It's a much smoother. It's not quite as sweet, but it's also not as acidic. But yeah, you're right to that end. The older one still just looks like apple juice,
Right.
whereas the newer one kind of looks more like a light beer. It's got that like it's the yellowish color. If you show that to someone, they would probably know it's not apple juice just by itself because it's got such a lighter color to it.
I feel like though there is a spicy character, because this one's spiced.
Oh, there is.
Both
Yeah.
of them were spiced, if I remember correctly, but this one was heavily spiced using and I say this one, I'm holding it up like you can see it. I mean the newer one, the Basic Bitch. That one is more robust in its flavor profile as far as like spice goes.
Yeah, it's a lot more pronounced. The
Right.
older one has muted a lot, but they've melded together really well with that. It's making me think that probably what I want to do is make like a 5-gallon batch of something that's still fairly simple, and then just chuck it in the garage. Like let me get 5 or 6 years on something and see what that tastes like.
Yeah, get a silicon bong in it and do this. I think that would be a great experiment. So I think that this one's on its downhill. The newer one, the older one, is on its downhill. So I think probably 3 years is it like at its perfect,
Okay.
like kind of like place. Because I know I still had some of these at like a year and a half, and I had those, and they still gave me really bad heartburn. This one was doing the same thing, but this one I used some more. I keep holding them up. The newer one, so stupid, Joe. But the newer one, and these are both dry ciders. They're not sweet. But the newer one, I did, newer brewing techniques that I've learned since we made that one, the older one. And this one has a tincture of cider that a tincture of the spices. So that's why it's got baking spices in it. I put some brown sugar in it to give it some molasses notes, like things like that. And then there's more nutrients in this one. That's why this one's more drinkable at this stage than that one was. 'Cause that one was rough.
Yeah.
Still, like right up till that point. So at some point, what I would like to do is take and make this recipe again, but spice it the same way I did with this and give it the same nutrient schedule as I did with this.
Well, it's a long haul experiment though, right? So like, I guess I'm thinking make a 5-gallon of something whenever you feel like. Bottle it up. A 5-gallon will get you like 28 bottles, somewhere around there. And then you just like have one a season.
Yep.
Just see how it ages. Like, it's you 7 years of aging. It's the first time you drink one, you're like, oh, this wasn't as good as the last one. You've hit your peak. You go drink the rest of them. It'd be obviously we're talking about almost a decade of someone's time tasting something, but it would be a fun experiment though.
I think that's the next thing to do though. Let's figure out like 2 or 3 things we'd like to do that with, and just make like a couple of batches all back to back that are that way, like at the end of the season.
Yeah.
After we finish recording the podcast, just do that, and during our off time between, December and March, April time period, just have all that stuff kind of worked out. I think that'd be great.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about the new Nvidia 4000 series GPUs. Have you heard about these yet?
I've heard about them. I've seen a little bit of people like doing them off. They look real good. Though I saw from the notes there maybe some power consumption concerns.
Yeah. So, the 4090 has been announced, and it is not 900 watts.
Okay.
It can still consume a little bit more than what 3080 and 3090 can consume, though.
Okay.
According to Nvidia's numbers, it's supposed to be about double the amount of, performance. People got to get stuff in their hands though to see how good that is, but they're still pretty power hungry. I mean, my first computer only had a max TDP of around 300 watts altogether, like with everything that was in it. So now we have computers that are pulling 1,000 watts total, and the graphics processor and the central processing unit, those both take up about 3/4 of that power consumption. So is it too much? I mean, considering the Steam Deck and the performance that you get from a well optimized inbuilt graphics, I mean, they're not the same. You're not 4K gaming. We're talking about 720p versus 4K, but still, is it too much?
I mean, what did the ultimate wattage end up being?
For what?
The 490.
I think it's like 350, 400.
Okay, I mean that's not as bad as what was in the notes, but that's rough.
Yeah, I'd put, because it was reported to possibly take up to 900 watts.
Yeah, 900 would be crazy. I'll admit it does have me a little concerned, because there's this usage curve, right, for like the average person, even someone getting into gaming, between like, one, how well does it run, like what's your actual performance, how much heat is that pumping up into the rest of your systems, and your price point and stuff like that. I'm sure it'll be expensive, but I'll admit when I first read it, I was saying, hey, the wattage is up. I was like, man, that's gonna come with heating concerns. I'm not sure if I ever told you about my old my first gaming computer was like on a GTX 285,
Yeah,
and
and
that
then you
was
told me about the 750 Ti that you had too. That was like a heat machine.
yeah. Well, it was the 285. That was the heat machine. I jumped straight from that 285 to like a 980
Hmm.
because I ran that machine into the ground. But it would like you would be in a regular sized bedroom. That was what my office was. I'd play a game on that thing. You'd be sweating.
Yeah.
Like it'd heat up a whole room. It was so hot. But if you take a look away from that, you're saying, okay, well, what if you're not doing it for casual gaming? What if you're doing it for something like crypto, and you're already putting it in something like a rack with a whole bunch of coolers on it and stuff? So I'm wondering if maybe that's where they're thinking. We're like, look, we got to straddle this line between people who want a good card for gaming and people who are buying cards to do stuff like mining, because
Well,
they have very different needs in terms of cooling and efficiency and stuff like that.
it's funny you bring that up because mining is kind of going the way of the dodo now.
It's rough now,
Yeah.
man. I mean, from what I've seen, and I'm not an expert, but from what I've been seeing on a lot of the current crypto prices after things have kind of really crashed down, that it's actually not economical to mine a bunch of coins now.
No, it's not.
I think Bitcoin's break even point is something like 21,000, something
Yeah.
around like that, and it's down at like 19.
Yeah.
In Ethereum, they've now moved to stake.
So you don't, unless you're doing Ethereum Classic, which is not nearly as profitable as the main Ethereum line, you're gonna, have some issues. Sorry, I had to pour the rest of the basic cider.
It's still good.
Yeah,
It's good.
Very, very good. Very good cider. Anyways, so yeah, so I think though the argument for having a super powerful card, especially since they have miner only cards now that are more efficient, the argument to have that is much less. And I mean I wouldn't say that I'm an expert in cryptocurrency. I do dabble in that. I mean, we both have like done our dabbling. We know a good bit about it, and I'm pretty passionate that cryptocurrency is eventually, in some way, shape, form, or fashion, probably not in the way that it is right now, going to take over finance, right? But there's probably going to be no anonymity. There's probably going to be no anything else like that. That are some of the founding things that people love about these cryptocurrencies that exist now.
Yeah, not to take it too far off the side, but on that note, have you heard about some of the stuff China is thinking about recently in terms of digital money?
Yeah.
Crazy stuff.
Yeah.
For people listening that haven't heard, and this isn't brand new stuff, but this is just getting brought up again. It's like economic concerns are coming up. Is China has floated the idea of a digital currency.
Yep.
Not really a cryptocurrency, but it's just a digital currency issued by the government that has an expiration date. So if you don't spend it by a certain point, you lose it.
Yeah.
That's just wild to think about. Like, one, I mean, that'd be scary government control. But two, I mean, just how pitfall-y digital currency can get if you take away some of those founding principles.
Yeah.
Just like we've talked a couple times about how, like, well, streaming used to be able to say it was from cable, but now it's pretty much just cable again.
Yep.
Because these principles about just like on demand, it's still yours, stuff like that, just kind of went away with a lot of services, and now they kind of suck. You get games people have bought being taken off of digital services, and now they can't play them anymore. Yada yada. I mean, imagine that with like your actual money.
Yep, it just goes away.
Yep.
You're leasing your money. You're not actually.
You can never save it. You just have
it.
to spend it on stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, wild.
So, yeah, I think the main takeaway though from the GPU thing is I'm not sure that I want a 4000 series graphics card unless there's some significant reason for me to move from my 3080 and my 3080 Ti, which are amazing graphics cards.
Yeah.
Like they do everything that I want and more. I just and my 2070 is still awesome. I've got a 2060, a 2070, a 3080, and a 3080 Ti that I have in different systems, and I love all of them. They all do different things. I just discovered how to really lower the size of my video library because like I run my own Plex media
Mm-hmm.
server, and so I'm re-encoding some of my H.264 into NVENC, which is the Nvidia encoder
Mm-hmm.
for H.265, and putting instead of having like FLAC or something like that for the audio stream, using like a Vorbis audio stream, which is a higher compression, a lossy compression, all this other stuff, but it goes like it took a 30 gig file that I had for Army of Darkness, which is already
Mm-hmm.
like a lower. So like even though you can tell that the source material that they used to make that 1080p print was not like something like from a Criterion collection
Yeah,
or
yeah.
something like that. But I was able to get that down to like 4 gigs.
Pretty good.
That's pretty awesome, right? I stripped out some of the stuff I didn't need. Like there were some audio tracks in there that I didn't need. There was a couple other things. Just stripped that stuff out and made it. And like I still have the if I want that, full experience of Army of Darkness on my system, I can put it in my PS3 and play the Blu-ray, or PS4 and play the Blu-ray of it. So I've
Mm-hmm.
got that. But if I want the convenience of being able to stream it anywhere, like on my phone or something, that's a pretty amazing like size difference
Yep.
between the two. My 2070 does that just fine in like
Mm-hmm.
20 minutes.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, I mean it's hard to make that argument. Like I've got my 3080 and I've never come close to pushing the envelope on it.
Yeah.
The only thing I've ever played that didn't perform well was like a Skyrim mod pack with like 1,000 mods in it, and that's not the card, that's just the mod pack,
Right.
So like, yeah, I mean 40,000 or 4,000 series or whatever they're calling it. That's cool, but I mean, what is there to consume that needs it?
Right. Well, so I think if we're talking about the business applications that could come out of using a more powerful card like that to do like
It's
AI
true.
research, but that they've got the consumer grade graphics cards locked down.
Yeah.
So unless there's some new like its RTX performance is double the amount, and more games are supporting RTX and ray tracing and things like that, and they've got like these really great experiences that you can have with the 40 series that you couldn't have with the 30 series. I just don't see the value proposition for the average consumer if
Yeah.
they don't have a 10, 20, or 30 series graphics card.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the equivalent graphics card I don't think is going to be that much of a bump from
Yeah,
the 30 series.
I can see that.
Yeah, I mean even the 20 series was a really they had some lackluster performance in other places, but they're still pretty awesome. So yeah. Anyways, so I was going to talk about prepping for the DevCor, but we've had some major turnarounds with our DevCor prep. So I think we should just go through our story like real quick. I'll start. We did a lot of study. We read the official like Cisco Learning, stuff. We did some real work in in like making flashcards and setting things up. I just remembered. I promised someone I'd give them access to our flashcards, and I forgot all about it yesterday. I need to do that.
Okay.
But we did all the study stuff. We hit it hard. Kind of the same thing that we did for the DevNet, and you went to go take it, and I'll let you take over from there.
Oh yeah, and it was brutal. And I mean, not even in a way that we've talked about Cisco certs. They're hard.
Yeah.
And sometimes you get questions that feel unfair. I kind of felt that way about DevCor, which I did for the Associate. I thought the Associate was an amazing test. The DevCor had a lot of problems where there's this big leap out of the concepts into you need to have a lot of like just knowledge about particular APIs.
And particular APIs the way that Cisco used them, right?
Well, not so much that, just because a lot of the APIs is like it's a Cisco product.
Yeah.
But it's like where the associate would give you, the API doc and say, okay, something's wrong with this, query, go fix it. It just doesn't give you the doc a lot of times. Or if it does, it's not super helpful. Like I had one question that think it was the InterSight API. I'm not sure. I don't remember anymore. But basically, it had this syntax for doing like a less than or a greater than that wasn't standard. So you had to go check the docs to see like LEGE, what symbols and stuff like that. But they gave me like a 10-page document, and all I needed was like 2 sentences out of 1 paragraph on it.
Right.
And you don't get a lot of time for questions, so it's like you almost might not have bothered to give me the doc at that point because I don't have time to read through this to find the little bit of information I need.
Yeah, and it's not like you could Control F and search the document.
Exactly, because you're like stuck in this little environment. I was just like speed reading, looking for just symbols to see if I can find them on the page. And then other times, they'll put you in an API, they'll leave half the URL out and just expect that you have that API path memorized.
Yeah.
No docs. And so that was a big punch. I'll say like the multiple choice questions, they were difficult, but I kind of thought they were fine. Like it wanted to know some very specific stuff about some APIs, but it was at least like general knowledge. But I couldn't get over that how many questions were, here's a fill in the blank for an API. Here's an API query that's written wrong. What's wrong with it? But they don't give you the documentation for the API. So I admit I walked out of that test thinking, okay, like what do I do from here? I'm not really interested in downloading 4 or 5 products API docs that would be hundreds of pages and just memorizing them all.
Yeah. Yeah, so then we changed tactics, right? And,
yeah, we did.
We're going through the official cert guide.
Yeah, the cert guide came out, by the time you're hearing this, probably about 3 months ago. It's like 2.5 months now. Came out at the end of July. So we've been reading through that. And what I'm hoping is, since kind of before now the cert guide hasn't been out. There's been a study guide, but not the official cert guide, which normally Cisco's pretty good about the cert guide matching up with the test.
Yep.
I'll admit, so far in the cert guide, I've not seen a lot of that really super in-depth API stuff. So what I'm hoping is that maybe Cisco has taken some of those questions out. Or, again, I'll firmly say, I think that test, if everything was just documented, would be a lot better. Because at least when I went to school and I was learning to program and stuff like that, those were open book tests.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to memorize everything in a language. If you don't know how to write API calls, you don't know Python or something like that, giving someone the API doc is not going to suddenly let them like stumble through it. But your developers should never have to memorize something like that because things change.
Yeah.
I mean, like Meraki went from version 0 to version 1. I've heard them talk to version 2 of their API. And things change between them. They're not necessarily backwards compatible. So it just feels a little bit of a dated concept to me to ask your developers getting this certification to memorize essentially a particular version of the API docs when your APIs update all the time. Hopefully there's backwards compatibility within the same version. New version will come out, or just like new endpoints will be made, probably with every release.
Yeah.
So that's a race you can't win if you're not giving somebody something to look through.
Absolutely. And I feel like so I probably going to have a second job where I'm doing something where I'm making test questions. And for that job, I had to like read through like a little course they give you. It's just like a short document, but it basically tells you how they want you to make test questions. And like reading through it, I'm like, oh, this makes sense. And this is absolutely the guidelines that everyone should have for how to make test questions. And I don't see that in the Cisco test questions. And one of the things that's important is the test question you should be able to find the information or know the information without it just being in the book, but it needs to be referenced in whatever your material is and stated specifically in that material. So the Cisco test questions, and one of the beefs I've always had with them are that they oftentimes aren't. They're in some sort of special material that, we ran into this with the DevNet too. There was a couple of questions that were in there that they're not in other material. You have to like know specifically what that material is about and then go find it to find that information. But if you didn't know, you couldn't know because nobody's like teaching that in any of the classes, anything like that.
Yeah,
So,
I think that's my, again, we'll see if the test has changed any, but I can say that is probably my primary critique of the DevCor is just where do you get exposed to that other than, okay, I just somehow got my hand on some of these enterprise tools. I just spent weeks and weeks and weeks in some developer lab somewhere because the official course material didn't have it. And we've both taken, we didn't completely go through the Pluralsight course.
yeah.
We took the official course. We went through Pluralsight. Both of those have tests. We were passing our tests on the official one. I got expert level on the Pluralsight one. Went and took that test. Wasn't even close.
Yeah. And I got the advanced level on the Pluralsight one. So me passing the DevNet, no problem. Me passing the DevCor, probably not going to happen.
Yeah,
not right now.
Yeah, once we finish the book, I'm going to give it another shot. But I think I've kind of already internalized, like, look, if I give this another shot after having taken the official course and read the official book, and I'm just not even close, I'm probably going to switch to another cert.
Yeah.
Because, at some point, because we're like the target audience, right?
Yeah.
We both, work at Cisco. I'm a developer at Cisco. I've developed tons of automation that runs entire services. In fact, I'm being asked to go rewrite a whole bunch of new stuff to use with a different controller.
Right.
So if I'm walking in there getting completely blindsided, what is the experience for just a random person trying to get into it? Like when you're not inside that world and you're like, hey, I want to get into network automation. Maybe I'm fresh out of school. Maybe I'm just looking for a career change. And we talked about this same stuff with the CCNA, about how it's a really good cert to go push yourself through to get into the industry. I mean, as it stands right now, I have a hard time recommending the DevCor, that professional level. I can recommend the associate. I think the associate's a great test. They nailed it, which is what let me down so much that I felt like the professional one just didn't hold up to that same standard.
I feel like the professional material is really good. The stuff that you study
the books
is
are
awesome.
great.
I've learned a ton. I just don't think that I don't know about the test, but I also feel like that about the CCNP. The CCNP, while I have it, I passed it, I put a lot of effort into learning it. It has some contradictory material in it. It has some points where the material, like clearly the people that wrote some of the test questions were not native English speakers. And that's fine if they're writing it in like German and then you're giving that to someone in German. Mm-hmm. But if it's someone who is not a native English speaker or they don't speak the version of English that you're taking the test in, don't use their test question. The double negatives, the trying to trip you up, the lack of like real clarity in the test questions or like what material you need to be able to actually like get through that just makes that while I appreciate that they're trying to protect the investment of that, it's kind of like when someone talks about pastoral mystique. You're not actually protecting anything. You're setting it up to be abused or forcing people to do things that they shouldn't do to be able to like reach this kind of level of thing. Mm-hmm. And then the pressure to keep that up is so high and it's so hard to keep it up. Eventually people will burn out or they're not going to like be able to manage it at some point. So I appreciate some of the advancements that they've done. I still think it's a very worthwhile cert. It definitely has some good stuff to it, but it doesn't have the weight of the CCIE. And most places don't give you bonuses or something based off your CCNP. Mm-hmm. And then the CCNP also doesn't have like the ease of getting into it or the community around like really making sure that you have that, based off of so it just kind of becomes this like really difficult cert to get, but it's also not really like, it's kind of like the PS Vita of certs. The creator is just not really pouring into it like they should.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can definitely see kind of where you're coming from with that. I think maybe the most telling thing is in this new round of certs, Cisco has opened up continuing education credits.
Right.
So you can take some of their courses, you can get credits. You don't have to take the test again. You can renew them with those. And we work with a bunch of people that are all Cisco certified. I don't know anybody who's planning on taking their tests again as opposed to doing continuing
Yeah.
education. Because even if you've got them, even if you work in networking every day, those certs are so hard
They're brutal.
that like I wouldn't leave it up to chance.
Yeah.
You know.
Me either. I've recertified my CCNP a couple times, and that was hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I did it off the T-shoot, which you can't do anymore because they
Yeah.
don't have that available. And that was because I am an expert in troubleshooting stuff. Like, there's few things that I can get up here and I can be like, I am an expert in that, like, at the level that I am probably one of, like, like the people you should be listening to when you're talking about this sort of thing. I could just walk in there and just like nail that test every time.
Yeah.
It's not easy, but it's in my bailiwick of things that I know how to do. And there's a couple other things like that. Like when we're talking about like hardware VPN, I am the man. I know that stuff left and right, back and forward, right? When we're talking about like writing an API, I know a lot, but I'm not that level. Like you're the guy that knows about that, not me. I'm much less in that, and that's part of this journey. I'm learning that, and I'm developing those skills and everything like that. I mean, I've gotten 100 times better since we started this. When we started like using products like NSO and DNAC and stuff like that, right? So, but yeah. So, anyways, it just if you're going into it and you've got that expertise and you know how to get the questions answered and you know where to get the material, this DevCor is a really good cert probably to have in your back pocket. But they don't have the expert out yet, and so you're kind of in that place where you're like the dev expert, but you're not the dev expert, kind of deal. So it's a weird like amalgamation of cert there.
Yeah, it is.
Well, I think that is the end of our topics for today, unless you got something else you want to say.
No, I think we covered it all.
All right. So that was Season 5, Episode 11 of the Beer and Broadband Podcast, slated to come out on October 3rd, 2022. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.